Update on the 8s for 8 project. There has been, classically when I build a car, I'm usually very organized, and I like to think I'm very good with my budget. I'm doing very good with the budget on this. So what I normally do is I order everything before I even start. So I have a pile of parts, and then I get the car, and then I can go nuts, and I work on it as fast as possible. That's what I like to do, but unfortunately for this case, that's not how it is. So what I did here was I got the car, I evaluated the car since, I didn't know really what Mark and I had purchased, and we figured everything out. And then what I did is I went to a quick drawing board. I made an Excel spreadsheet. I'm not a genius with it by any means, but I'm good enough. And I figured out cost-effective parts of the swap. And I was like, where do I have money? Where can I use money? Part of this is where I'm like, we can really cut some corners on some things. This will be obviously, if you're tuning in, you're prepared for a long-winded explanation about simple things, and that's the kind of thing you enjoy. So here you are, and there's your warning. Anyway, so on this build, I think when we're done, we're going to find we could do it cheaper, because instead of doing really ridiculous or cutting corners or making intercooler piping out of exhaust tubing or doing no intercooler at all, or for things like really shitty used items, we're not going to do. If we can, we're going to slightly upgrade where we can to make it not a total hunk of trash, so we don't have to upgrade everything in the long run. Also, if and when we do plan to sell, we don't want people to be like, when they look at it. So, bearing that in mind, we're also trying to make the price point realistic. So there's another reason why if stuff was slightly more, I spent that, or I rounded up slightly on some things. And one of the reasons was if the budget was on its way out of control, I would see it early on, no surprises kind of thing, even though, like I said, I like to think I'm good at this after how many I've done. So, after much deliberation, I wanted to do the Billet 8088 in T4 or the V-band, because recently he had like a very good price on that, like $875, and it was everything. It comes with the V-band inlet and outlets and all sorts of stuff, and I'm like, man, that turbo will really rock house. But it's almost $900 for everything. And after I laid my budget out, I'm like, I want to come in under and overachieve, as always. So that's what I ended up going with. Is I have a S475 on the way. It's a VS Racing S475. So it's a cast 75 millimeter. I'm unsure of the large end of the compressor, but it's a 9688 turbine T6 5-inch downpipe. So that's going to go on. I have a bunch of Monkey Fab hot side stuff I can show you then when it starts to happen. I picked up this 4.8 liter with unknown mileage and a little bit of an exhaust leak, obviously, and the stock intake. And what I really want to is use the stock feed and return, because it saves you big money. Let's toss that. This saves money, so even if the fuel pressure is kind of high, that's just something we'll mitigate, and I will explain when we get there. The issue is if you're running a 450 or two 450s, you may be overrunning that regulator. It's very small, the return line is small, the orifice, he said orifice, is small. So you may run into a problem where your base pressure is like 75 or 100. And if your base pressure is 100, you're basically riding the pressure overflow on the fuel pumps themselves. So that's another thing, but that's, like I said, this car is 90% race car. At this point, it'll be nice if it's okay to drive on the street. That's going to be something that happens after it hits its goal. I would love to tell you, one of our goals for Mark and I is to drive this car from his house, or my house, an hour or 2 hours away from Atco, and make a high 8 pass and drive back home, pick up coffee and everything else. But since this is the How to Go Fast for Cheap Race Car Edition, if you have to trailer it, that's part of the game. So that's not going to be added into the price unless we can fit it, or we add it in later and just tell you what it did cost. But rough estimate is showing approximately $7,500 on paper, and we should make about 700 tire with the cast 75 clone. And if anybody knows, if this weighs 3,000 pounds and makes 700 tire and 60 foot's okay, it will go 8s. So that's exciting. If you didn't know, that's what will happen. So it's just ironing everything out. And then this 4.8 is, I don't know all the details, honestly. So we're going to have to, I'm going to take this motor apart and we're going to gap the rings, because this is going to end up being a somewhat, even though I hate the word, max effort build. So we're going to lean on it. Normally, if your goal is 500-600, I'd say really don't touch it. I didn't touch it in like my truck. But this guy is going to get hurt. It's going to get leaned on. So I would like to check every now and then. People are like, oh, it has a ton of mileage, don't worry about it. Nah, I've pulled apart some 200,000 mile motors, and the damn thing has like a 17 ring gap on the top ring on some of the pistons. So that would not suffice when you're going to make 700-800 tire and you don't want to hurt anything. I don't know if this is Gen 3. I'm assuming it's Gen 3. When we pull the pan, we will see. I got my mounts from, this is a UPR-K member. So I actually just bought UPR mounts, and these are UPR to LS swap mounts. So they bolt. They do not bolt to the LS at all, actually. I thought they were LS to whatever, but maybe two of them will line up. Anyway, we'll figure that out when we get there. So that's what we're going to bolt in. We're going to use the stock heads. We're going to use the stock intake. We're going to do everything we can. I'm going to use a set of Snake Eater injectors, most likely. We're going to use E85, $2 race fuel. We're going to hook up the stock pedal to the stock drive-by cable, and then we're going to do small upgrades along the way. What will be interesting is doing, like, we'll see how the bottom end and everything handles, and maybe do a turbo upgrade and see about the power. So that'll be one of those things like, hey, if you spring for another $400, you have a little bit more power capability. I know, like we said, we do eventually want to probably put a better motor in, or a larger, or a built, or all three, a little bit larger built motor in, and weigh in all the comparisons then. I would like it to be very tiered and learn everything as we go. I know a lot of you guys tune in because of all of that. And I talked to Elgin, the guys that cut the Sloppy Stage 2. They named it after me just for fun, just because they like what I do. Exciting. I still laugh about it to this day. I talked to them. Everyone's like, they should send you money. A couple of you guys are new and you might not realize it, but that's not what I'm all about. So they are sending me a cam for free, but I'm marking it down as if you would have bought it, obviously. So they are sending me a Sloppy Stage 2 and a Sloppy Stage 3, and they're sending me springs. And I also talked to the guy over there, Scott, for a while, and I was like, I have this experiment in mind for a long time about messing with push rods. So he's going to send me 3 different types of push rods. So initially, this is going to be just a cam and springs engine like I always do. Sloppy Stage 2 works with a 4.8 and that medium-sized turbo exceedingly well, so I'm not going to change that recipe. But what he did send me was, I think he's sending me 3 different push rods. So one of them is like a coated stock-ish push rod. The other one is like a chromoly, and then the other one is like a hybrid thick wall push rod. So what I am interested to see is, once this makes its power and it's reliable seemingly, and we like our results, I want to swap push rods on the dyno. It would be very easy, and see if there's any power gain or visible stability increase, anything. I'd be interested. And it may be one of those factors where this cam is just not aggressive enough, or the power, it doesn't make a difference. So there's going to be a lot of things for people to learn and take from that. We may see no difference at all, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a good upgrade. Like I always say to people, if you're really swinging something, or if your cam has aggressive ramp rates, or if your spring is heavy, or all three of those things are happening, maybe they're worth it. But a lot of times people had tried to upsell me and my friends on push rods, and I'm like, how about you give me a set and I swap them back and forth on the dyno, and if it makes power, I'll buy them. And they always became uncomfortable. It never worked out. So we'll learn on our own. Elgin is on board for that test. They would like to know also in this case what happens. So I will have the sloppy stage 3 is like a 230 something, low 240 something. I actually, awful that I don't know the specs, but not many people run them. But the stage 2 is like a 228, 230, and the stage 3 is like a 232, 240-ish. So I think that'll be a little bit too big for the 4.8 as is. A couple people can chime in maybe before I jam it in. But what mostly is going to happen next is I'm going to have Mark come up here, and we're gonna take an entire day probably. I might even take a vacation day off work. And we'll strip this entire motor down when I have the cam and springs, and we will gap the rings and do the cam and springs, and then hopefully put the motor and the transmission in. I have a converter coming. There were a couple options for about $300, $400 converters. I went with my buddies over at Jake's to try one of their budget converters. It's about $375. And we went back and forth on the specifications. He said he would like to help. So I talked to him. I was like, dude, I don't want to waste your time, but you know, let's talk about this. So we figured something out. We're going to use that. And then, like I said, we bought some nicer products. We bought a blemished B&M Stealth billet shifter off eBay, which is about $250. But one of the things that you can't really skimp on that much is how accurate your shifter is on a TH400. If it is selecting in between gears or you automatically hit reverse, you're going to have a bad day. Your good transmission's not going to be good very long. So that's one thing that Mark and I strongly believe in. And obviously any transmission builder is going to be like, please don't get a bullshit shifter. Please adjust it correctly. Please check your fluid level. Before you check your fluid level, check your pan height and dipstick and everything else. So, which reminds me, I don't have a dipstick, but I usually use the eBay $26 one. So that's not going to really kill my budget. And then we'll be doing all sorts of fun stuff like that. So, that's the update real quick. I mean, I have my engine. I have my stuff laid out. We're under budget so far. I did say I want to go 8s for 8, which means if it's $8,800, it's still 8s for $8,000. I would love to go 8s for under $8,000 just to give everyone a middle finger and have fun doing it. And that doesn't include, like, safety equipment and everything, obviously. Like I said, it's going to be pretty safe. But we would just like to pummel out a high 8, maybe even no cage, just to do it, just to say we could do it. And then immediately cage the car, everything else, show you guys a weight difference, yada, yada, yada. So that's where the big like learning aspect comes from. We do want to have it safe. Mark is licensed driver. He has an NHRA license, everything else. So, and then staging everything, which is something I'm going to heavily rely on you guys. And I think one thing that I might do is VS Racing was kind enough to donate the turbo for this project. So what I think I would like to do is we're obviously going to upgrade it at some point. I think what I'll do is I'll raffle it for a fairly cheap amount of buy-ins. And when I raffle that, I will either donate or use the money to purchase another larger turbo from VS and keep selling off or raffling the lower prices or the lower pieces off of the car. Let me know what you guys think of that. I think my first gut reaction is the donate the money to charity stuff and then to see if he's on board with continuing to give me better parts. But then the other part of me wants to recoup a little bit to spend on upgrades so we all learn kind of thing. We'll I guess we'll figure it out as we go along, but that's the plan. I'm sticking to it. We're doing pretty good on everything else. Very soon, within the next week or two, this engine build is going to happen. The cam and everything should be in this week. we are having another, we just got rid of all of our snow and we're having another 24-hour snow and ice marathon. I just juggled all the cars. I have the Infiniti back. My buddy did a bunch of aluminum fabrication, mounted the heat exchanger, did a bunch of other things. So I want to do a bunch of driving the Infiniti around and beating it up, but it's going to be snow and ice and junk soon. But that'll be a good time to work on this, luckily. Yeah, anyway, this winter has been rough. This entire last year has been rough with like 70 some inches of rain in Pennsylvania. Anyway, enough complaining. But yeah, that's what we want to do. Cast turbo, go high eights, show everybody it can be done. It's not BS. And then we're going to tube the front end out a little bit, get a little nuts and creative with mounting everything, figure out what kind of rad we want to do. I had a company reach out to me that say they build radiators and they would like to help me with a specific build radiator for this project and then offer it for discount or a percentage discount code off of their entire website to you guys. So that's like another thing I have to mitigate. When I posted this, it garnered a lot of attention and a lot of people were on board. And that kind of sucks because it has a lot of interest because of what it's capable of and what everyone's capable of learning. The other thing is people are like, we want to give you really cool shit. And I'm like, it would be cool. That would be awesome. I would like to have your cool products. Yes, please. But people have to be able to buy it and it still has to be economical on paper or else I can't do it anyway. So, as this build progresses, I can't wait to utilize some of those people and get products myself at a discount to see whether or not it's worthwhile. All of that good stuff, obviously. But yeah, it's funny. Like people are like, I'm gonna give you whatever, and I'm like, well, I can't take your stuff and then write $200 and then have everyone call me a bullshitter. That's not gonna happen. So. Yeah, anyway. First world problems, right? How long am I going here? Am I just talking forever? Having a tough time remembering how long I have been rambling. Are you guys familiar with this issue? Is it bad? Is it good? On top of that, I have a bunch of dyno videos that I need to crank out. My little guy is asleep, so I'm going to work on that. I must have 3, 4, 5 cars recently that I dynoed that surprised me, that were awesome, and I'd love to go over it and post that stuff as filler. Not just as filler, it is educational. A lot of people really like that stuff. And then moving on with this project and showing you guys what we're going to do. So that is the gist of it. If you have any other questions, let me know. I'll do my best to mitigate the comment section. If you think it's total BS, go ahead and let me know. If you think it's awesome, let me know. If you want to talk about our upgrade path, that's something we can start putting down now. But Mark and I would eventually like to race this as is, see how it is. The issue is it's going to be going so fast that we do need an engine diaper and probably a scatter pan underneath, because we don't want to wreck the car. If something happens on the top end, we would like to push this engine, but part of me would like to reward this engine because a lot of people don't build the 4.8, and I think it would be hilarious to take this 4.8 liter and put a stroker crank in it and make like a 360-inch pistons rods engine and hit that with a big turbo, because who does that? That's dumb. We shouldn't do that, but so that's exactly why I'm going to do it. So that's a whole other thing I'm thinking of. I have a guy on board with helping us out with that also, which is incredible. A lot of people are interested in learning from this no bullshit structured upgrade path and seeing where you could save, seeing where you should spend, all of that stuff, obviously. So, and then also I'll mention, like, if we have a problem with this engine, I'm not going to add the cost of another engine. I'm just going to buy another engine and put it in the paperwork as if that's what it cost us. Because what I ran into was like a bit of a snowball effect on my Fairmont 5. I was doing really good initially, and then I had a bunch of motor issues, and then my turbo went, and then I had to do turbo and motor, and then I got one of those LC9 DOD motors, and I had issues with it not making any power and the crankshaft being retarded, and like a whole slew of I don't even want to finish this car stuff going on. So yeah, I don't want to do that with this, obviously. So if we have an issue right away or a very low horsepower failure, we're going to, we're going to try to omit that and go right to the throat and start over again, because normally that doesn't happen for me. So we'll see how it ends up. Anyway, what I'll do, like I did before, is provide an entire price sheet. Obviously, some of these, like this entire chassis, was a hell of a deal. The guy is awesome that sold it to us. So all of that stuff is stuff you should remember. And anyway, I'll cut this off before I talk for an hour and don't realize it. So that's where we are. Engine intake is here. Everything is rolling along. As soon as the camshaft comes in, a little bit of slap bang with the engine and a little bit of a piston ring, cordless piston ring gapper is going to happen. Everything's going to get slammed back together. The motor mounts are going to go in, transmission, and then, everything's going to start rolling fast, and it's going to go to Mark's for some front end fab and some tubing and everything else. And there's going to be more discussion and videos and updates and parts and then running and then racing. So it'll be exciting. I hope everyone hangs in there. It seems like there's plenty of interest so far. Lots of, I can't wait to see this. I have been waiting to see this. Also, people are like, thanks for hopefully driving the price of SN95s up. Hopefully we can do that for you guys. Anything for the people. So that's it. Good night.